Okay, so in this video, I'm going to show you quickly how to create a graphic scale and a north arrow in Rhino. So at this point, I'm in Rhino. I have a topo drawing, and I've created a layout. So I'm on one of my layout pages here, and this is a 1/8 of an inch equals a foot, a scale view of my topo drawing, my 2D topo drawing. And the best way really to put a scale on a page like this is to actually draw it on the page in paper space before you go to print it to PDF or to physical hard copy. So what I'll do is I'll make a new layer. I'll call this my labels and and I'll set that layer to current. And then using the text command on the keyboard, I can write out the scale of my drawing. Okay, and then I just click somewhere to place it. So that's the text command, not the text object command. And if I want to edit this text, meaning change what it says or make it smaller, etc., I can just double click on it. So in here you can see I can change the height of it, which would effectively change how large it is on the page. So in Rhino, you change things by just typing in what dimension you want them to be rather than like font size. And then you can move that object around and place it wherever you want on your page. Now, that's how you write out your graphic, or write out your scale, I should say. The way to make a graphic scale is, again, just to draw it on the page. Now, I'm going to draw in inches because I'm on paper space, which means I'm working in inches. So if I hit escape, you can see down at the bottom it says inches there. So if I draw a line, and let's say I want to draw, let's start with like 2 feet. Usually the way you draw a graphic scale is you draw a series of lines with bars between them that represent different dimensions. So all you got to do is you draw a graphic scale. You start with the line command. So I typed in line there. I'll click anywhere. And then I'm going to enter the dimension. Let's say I want my first line to be 2 inches, or I'm sorry, 2 feet, the equivalent of 2 feet, which on my page would actually only be 1/4 of an inch, right? So I would type in the command line 0.25, press enter. Now I've set the distance of my line and I'm holding shift to snap to ortho and draw it straight horizontal. And so there is the first line. So I would also draw vertical lines. It doesn't really matter how big this is. I would actually make it well. And so you might find that's actually kind of small. But so then we're going to draw like, a vertical line in between every separate dimension that we want to write out on the page. So I could draw another line from that second line, that second vertical line. So let's say I'm going to mark out 2 feet, then I'll mark out, I don't know, let's go like 8 feet. So it's important to remember that when you write out the dimensions, we're not measuring the distance between this line and the next line, we're measuring the distance from the very start of the scale. So in other words, I want the line to be actually only the equivalent of 6 feet because I've already drawn out 2 feet, right? So the equivalent of 6 feet on my page, because I'm in 1/8 of an inch equals a foot. Again, you can get to these numbers just by multiplying that number 1/8 of an inch by whatever dimension you want it to be. So it would be 6 by 8 times 1/8 of an inch. Happens to also be 3/4 of an inch. So I would type 0.75 in the command line. I'm holding shift and I'll click to make a straight horizontal line. And then I'm just going to use the command copy to continue to draw these vertical lines. So I'll draw another line. So now we're at 2 feet, 8 feet. Let's maybe go double. So if we went to 16 feet, we would want to draw another line that's the equivalent of 8 feet long, which would be 1 inch. So I'll just type 1 in the command line, hold shift and click. And again, I'll copy this vertical line end there. Now we have 2 feet, 8 feet, 16 feet. Let's double it again and go to 32 feet. So I would draw another line, and 32 feet should be 2 inches. Holding shift to draw it straight. Copy this line one more time. So that's a graphic scale. And now all we would need to do is label it. Again, I would use the text command, 0 feet. And I'm also going to change the justification so it's center and also at the top. And then I can just click right on that, on the bottom of that vertical line at the start. Too large, I should have made it smaller. Okay, make it a 1/4 inch. So if we do have this, you can write both a graphic scale and the actual scale of the drawing. Always good practice. And I'll copy this. It might be too large with our first line here to have both. So we can always do, or we could make the text smaller as well. I'll just copy this out to each vertical line there. So we did 2 feet, 8 feet, 15 feet. I could just, if you don't move your lines there, I would actually join this into one thing. So select all your lines and join them when you're done drawing. Make a little bit of a space there. The text isn't quite touching the scale bar. Now the other thing you'll notice, and I'm going to put my page in print preview here. So up in the top left of the viewport, right click and hit print preview. Now that line, because it's on this new layer I've created, it's going to print out very thin because I haven't applied a line weight to it. So just like I would with any other line in my drawing, I'm going to go to that layer that it's on, and I'll go to print width, and I'll set a, just so I can see it, something like that. There's a lot of different styles to graphic scales, but this is like a very simple version. Obviously, anything you see that you want to replicate can. But that's the gist of how to do it. Draw it right on the page. And to draw a north arrow, you do exactly the same thing. You just draw it right on the page. I like to do simple north arrows as well. So I would just make a circle. I'll use the command circle. Doesn't have to be any particular size. Then I'll use the command line. And generally how you draw a north arrow is you draw either kind of a compass or just a single line that points in the direction of north from the center to the periphery of the circle. So in order to snap to the center of my circle, I'll turn on the center O snap. And you kind of want to hover your mouse around the perimeter of the circle, and you'll see the little text bubble there, say center. So you know you've snapped to center. And then you also want to snap to, I could turn it, so it's going to snap to anywhere. Obviously, any line we draw between the center of the circle and the periphery is perpendicular. I could turn that snap off. The way to get the, the way to get the top of this, if it isn't already a start and end, so my end is on the right there. I would just turn on the quad snap. Will snap to any like extent of an arc. That I did the wrong way. So just to recap, you'd want to have the center object snap and the quad object snap turned on. Now, I would also make this line darker to indicate that it's the one that's the important one, right? The one that's pointing to the north. And instead of making a new layer for that, which isn't really worth my time, I could, if you're using separate layers for the line weights in your drawing, I would recommend you just use those layers to make that line, like if you have a line that's a heavier line weight, I would just put it on that layer. Or you could change the properties of the layer itself, or sorry, the object itself. So select the object, go to properties, go to object, and go to print width. I could make thicker size. And just like before, I would also add a text. I had a piece of text to indicate where north. You can also scale text objects using the scale command, whatever size you want. There you have it. So that's how you would draw a north arrow and a graphic scale in Rhino before you print. And so when I go to print this, it'll show up on my page. I guess I could point out the other thing you could do if you have stuff that's in the way and you wanted to block it. We could make a rectangle around this. And hatch it. And I would do a solid hatch. I would select that hatch under print color, go to white. And then that should like block out the background and give us a clear area to have this information. But not super crucial to do it that way. Of course, you can always leave a margin as well. It's more common. Information down at the bottom like that. In fact, you would also want to have, normally you would have a label, well, that said site plan. Okay, so that'll conclude this video, how to add labels and scale on a layout in Rhino.